The gunshot split the desert silence at dawn, sending crows scattering from a gnarled mesquite. And Elena Vasquez knew before she even reached the canyon floor that something had been hit, because the morning birds had gone silent in that way that meant fresh blood. She had been riding toward Silver Creek, Arizona territory, with little more than a carpetbag of belongings and $62 sewn into the hem of her traveling dress. It was September 1883, and the desert morning held that peculiar quality of light that made the red rocks glow like embers. Elena had left Santa Fe 3 weeks prior after her father's death, heading west to find work as a school teacher in one of the mining towns that dotted the territory like settlements of ambition and desperation. She was 22 years old, educated beyond what most frontier towns expected of women and entirely alone in the world. The cry came next, high and pitiful, more whimper than howl. Elena pulled her mare to a stop and listened. Years of living in New Mexico had taught her the sounds of the desert, the difference between wind through stone and an animal in distress. This was the latter. She dismounted carefully, tying her horse to a creosote bush, and followed the sound down a rocky slope where barrel cacti grew in clusters like green sentinels. She found the Coyote Pup wedged between two boulders, its hind leg bloody and twisted at an angle that made her stomach turn. The animal could not have been more than 4 months old, still fuzzy with puppy fur, its eyes wide with pain and fear. Someone had shot at it and missed a clean kill. The bullet had grazed its leg and shattered bone. Elena had no particular fondness for coyotes. They killed chickens and howled at night and were generally considered vermin. But looking at this small creature trembling in the early light, she could not bring herself to leave it to die slowly in the desert heat. She removed her shawl and approached carefully, speaking in soft Spanish, the language of her childhood. The pup snapped weakly at her hands, but she managed to wrap it in the fabric and lift it free from the rocks. Blood soaked through the wool immediately. The animal needed help beyond what Elena could provide, and she knew it. She also knew that Silver Creek was still 10 miles distant, and there was nothing between here and there except sand and stone and sky. Nothing except the thin ribbon of smoke she could see rising perhaps 2 miles to the north, indicating a chimney, a dwelling, another human being in this vast emptiness. Elena made a decision that would alter the course of her entire life. She secured the Coyote Pup in her saddlebag, leaving the top open so it could breathe, mounted her mare, and turned north toward that column of smoke. The land rose gradually as she rode, changing from flat desert to rolling hills studded with juniper and pine. A creek appeared, surprising and welcome, lined with cottonwoods whose leaves were just beginning to turn gold at the edges. She followed the water upstream until she saw the cabin, a sturdy structure of logs and stone set back against a red rock cliff. A corral held 4 horses, all of them looking well fed and groomed. Chickens scratched in a yard. Laundry hung on a line, indicating someone who cared about cleanliness and order. The smoke came from a stone chimney, steady and purposeful. Elena dismounted at the edge of the yard and called out, as was proper. You did not approach a man's home unannounced in this territory, not if you valued your life. Hello, the house. I need help. For a long moment, nothing. Then the door opened, and a man stepped out onto the porch, and Elena felt her breath catch in a way that had nothing to do with fear. He was tall and lean in the way of men who worked hard every day of their lives, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of creek water in shade, somewhere between gray and green and blue, depending on the light. He wore denim pants and a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle. A gun belt hung on his hips, the revolver sitting easy in its holster. He looked to be perhaps 27 or 28, his face tanned and weathered but handsome in a stark, angular way. "Madam." His voice was cautious but not unfriendly. "You lost." "No, but I found something, that is." Elena gestured to her saddlebag. "A coyote pup shot and badly injured." "I know it is a strange request, but do you have medical supplies? Bandages, whiskey for cleaning wounds?" The man walked down from the porch with an easy, rolling gait and approached the horse. He looked at Elena with undisguised curiosity, taking in her dark hair pinned in a practical bun, her traveling dress dusty from the road, her brown eyes that met his directly without coyness or fear. "You stopped to help a coyote?" There was no mockery in his voice, only genuine surprise. "I could not leave it to suffer." He considered this, then nodded. "Let me see." Elena opened the saddlebag carefully. The pup had gone quiet, either from shock or exhaustion. The man peered in, then let out a low whistle. "That is one lucky little beast finding you." He looked up at her. "I have supplies. Tend to my horses when they get injured. Bring it inside." Elena hesitated. It was not proper for an unmarried woman to enter a bachelor's home unchaperoned, but propriety seemed less important than saving a life, even a small coyote life. She lifted the bundled pup from the saddlebag and followed the man into the cabin. The interior surprised her. She had expected the rough disorder of a man living alone, but instead found a space that was simple and clean and thoughtfully arranged. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a fire burning low. A table and 2 chairs sat near the window. Shelves held books, actual books, more than she would have expected. A narrow bed was made up with military precision in one corner. Herbs hung drying from the rafters, filling the air with the scent of sage and chamomile. "Put it on the table." The man was already gathering supplies from a wooden cabinet: a bottle of whiskey, clean cloth torn into strips, a sewing kit, a jar of what looked like salve. Elena laid the pup down gently. It whimpered but did not struggle. The man washed his hands in a basin, then unwrapped the shawl carefully. "What is your name?" he asked as he examined the injury. "Elena Vasquez. I am traveling to Silver Creek." "Cole Hartley. I run horses." He poured whiskey over the wound and the pup yelped. "Sorry, little one. I know it hurts." Elena watched his hands as he worked. They were large and scarred from hard use, but gentle as he cleaned the blood away and examined the broken bone. He worked with the quiet concentration of someone who had done this before, who knew about suffering and healing. "The bone is shattered," he said finally. "I can set it, but I am not sure the leg will heal straight. The pup might always have a limp. Better a limp than death." Cole glanced up at her, and something in his eyes warmed. "I agree." He set the bone as best he could while Elena held the pup still, murmuring soft reassurances in Spanish. The animal bit down on the shawl and trembled but did not fight them. Cole wrapped the leg carefully, creating a small splint from pieces of wood and strips of cloth. He rubbed salve into the other scrapes and cuts, then wrapped the whole thing in clean bandaging. "There." He stood back. "Now it needs water and rest. And probably food, though I have no idea what to feed a coyote pup. Milk, if you have it, softened bread, small pieces of meat." Elena stroked the pup's head and it looked at her with exhausted eyes. "My grandmother raised an orphaned coyote once. They are not so different from dogs when young." Cole produced a shallow dish and some goat's milk from a cool box outside. The pup lapped at it weakly. They stood together watching it drink, and Elena became acutely aware of how close Cole was standing, the warmth radiating from his body, the smell of him that was leather and sage and something else, something distinctly male. "You have a kind heart," Cole said quietly. You are the one with medical supplies and skill. You are the one who brought it here instead of riding past." He looked at her directly. Most people would not have stopped. Most would have shot it themselves to end its misery. Elena met his gaze. "I am not most people. I can see that." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Elena could not quite name. Then the pup finished drinking and collapsed onto its side with a small sigh, and the spell broke. "You should stay until it is stable," Cole said, stepping back. "Make sure the bleeding has stopped." "I will make coffee." "I should not impose. You already did when you brought a wounded animal to my door." But he smiled when he said it, and Elena found herself smiling back. She stayed. Cole made coffee that was strong and hot and better than she expected. They sat at the table while the pup slept, and they talked. Elena learned that Cole had come to Arizona from Texas 5 years ago, that he bred and trained horses for the cavalry and for ranchers who could afford quality stock. He had built this cabin himself, preferring the solitude of the hills to the chaos of town. He read books on animal husbandry and history, and sometimes poetry, though he said that last part with a self-deprecating smile as if expecting her to mock him. Elena told him about her father, a scholar who had taught her Latin and mathematics along with her letters, about his death from pneumonia the previous winter, about her decision to head west rather than stay in Santa Fe, where everything reminded her of loss, about her hope to find work teaching children to build a new life in a place where the past did not weigh so heavily. "Silver Creek has a school," Cole said. "The last teacher left to get married. They have been looking for someone for months. Then perhaps I will have luck. You will." He said it with such certainty that Elena felt warmth spread through her chest. The sun was high when Elena finally rose to leave. The pup was sleeping peacefully, its breathing even, the bleeding stopped. "What will you do with it?" she asked. Cole looked at the small bundle on his table. "I suppose I will keep it until it heals. After that, I will release it back to the wild where it belongs." "That is kind of you. You started it. I am just finishing what you began." Elena collected her shawl, now stiff with dried blood, and moved toward the door. Cole followed her outside to where her mare was dozing in the shade. "Silver Creek is 10 miles south by southwest," he said. "Follow the creek and you cannot miss it. Mrs. Morrison runs a boarding house on 1st Street. She is honest and charges fair rates. Tell her I sent you. You know her." "I know most people in Silver Creek. I sell them horses." He helped her mount, his hand steadying her elbow, and the brief touch sent electricity up Elena's arm. "Be careful on the road. Stay alert." "I will. Thank you, Cole, for helping with the pup. Thank you for bringing it to me." He stepped back, squinting up at her in the sunlight. "I hope you find what you are looking for in Silver Creek, Elena." She wanted to say something more, something about how talking to him had been the most pleasant few hours she had spent since her father's death. How his smile made her feel less alone, how she hoped this would not be the last time they saw each other. But the words would not come, so she simply nodded and turned her horse south. She looked back once from the top of the first rise. Cole was still standing in his yard, watching her go, one hand raised in farewell. Elena waved back, then urged her mare into a trot, her heart beating faster than the horse's hooves. Silver Creek was larger than Elena had expected. A proper town with 2 streets, a dozen businesses, a church with a white steeple, and houses spreading out in every direction. The surrounding hills were scarred with mine shafts, and she could hear the distant thunder of blasting as companies dug deeper into the earth searching for silver and copper. Men crowded the streets, most of them miners, some cowboys, all of them stopping to stare as a young woman rode past alone. Mrs. Morrison's boarding house was exactly where Cole had said it would be, a 2-story building painted cheerful yellow with white trim. Elena tied her horse and climbed the porch steps, suddenly exhausted from the long day. The woman who answered her knock was perhaps 50, sturdy and practical-looking, with gray hair pinned neatly and sharp blue eyes that assessed Elena in one sweeping glance. "Help you? I am looking for a room. Cole Hartley sent me. He said you run an honest establishment, Mrs. Morrison's expression softened immediately. "Cole said that, did he? Well, any friend of his is welcome here. I am Margaret Morrison. Come in." The boarding house was clean and well-maintained, with lace curtains and floors that gleamed with polishing. Mrs. Morrison showed Elena to a small room on the second floor with a bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the street. $3 a week including breakfast and supper, Mrs. Morrison said. Extra for laundry. No men above the first floor, no drinking, no profanity. Church is expected on Sunday but not required. You looking for work? I am a teacher. I heard the school needs someone. Desperately. The school board meets Tuesday nights at the church. You should speak to Reverend Walsh. He is the head of the board. Mrs. Morrison paused. How do you know Cole? Elena explained about the Coyote Pup, and Mrs. Morrison listened with a smile growing on her face. That sounds like Cole. He has a soft spot for wounded things, though he would deny it. She studied Elena with new interest. He does not send people to me often. In fact, you are the first in the 2 years I have known him. He must have taken a liking to you. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. He was simply being helpful. MMHMM. Mrs. Morrison's smile suggested she did not believe that for a moment. Well, you get settled. Supper is at 6. Welcome to Silver Creek, Miss Vasquez. Elena spent the next 2 days exploring the town and preparing for her meeting with the school board. Silver Creek was rough around the edges but not lawless, with a sheriff who actually enforced order and merchants who took pride in their businesses. The school building was small but solid, with desks for 20 students and a good supply of books and slates. The position paid $30 a month plus a small stipend for supplies. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to live on. The school board interviewed her on Tuesday evening in the church fellowship hall. Reverend Walsh was a kind-faced man in his 60s who asked about her education and philosophy of teaching. The other board members, all men, were more concerned with whether a young, unmarried woman could maintain discipline with older boys. I taught in my father's school in Santa Fe for 4 years, Elena said calmly. I have experience with students of all ages. I believe in firm but fair discipline, in making learning engaging, and in treating every child with respect regardless of their background. Some of our students are Mexican, one board member said, as if this were a challenge. Then they will appreciate having a teacher who speaks Spanish fluently. Elena met his gaze steadily. Education should be available to all children, sir. That is what I believe. She got the job. She would start the following Monday, giving her less than a week to prepare lessons and organize the classroom. Elena threw herself into the work with relief, grateful to have purpose again, to have something to fill the empty spaces grief had left behind. But in the quiet moments, often late at night before sleep came, she found her thoughts returning to Cole, to his gentle hands as he tended the Coyote Pup, to the way he had listened when she talked about her father, really listened, as if her words mattered, to the books on his shelves and the herbs drying in his rafters and the careful way he had helped her mount her horse. She wondered how the pup was faring, whether it was healing, whether Cole thought of her at all, or if she had been just a brief interruption in his solitary routine. On Friday afternoon, she got her answer. Elena was at the mercantile purchasing chalk and paper when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Afternoon, Tom. I need 50 pounds of oats and some of that liniment you ordered for me." She turned, and there was Cole, dusty from the road, his hat in his hands. He saw her at the same moment, and his face lit up in a smile that made her heart skip. "Elena." "Cole," she smiled back, unable to help herself. "How is the pup? Come see for yourself. It is outside." They walked out together, leaving the shopkeeper grinning knowingly behind them. Tied to Cole's horse was a small travois, and on it, nested in blankets, was the Coyote Pup. It was sitting up, alert and bright-eyed, the bandaged leg held carefully off the ground. Oh, it looked so much better. Elena knelt beside the travois, and the pup licked her hand with enthusiasm. "You have done a wonderful job. It is a fighter, been eating like a horse, getting stronger every day." Cole crouched beside her. "I thought you might want to see, since you are the one who saved it." "We saved it together." "Yes." His eyes met hers. "We did." They stood up together, standing closer than was strictly proper on the public street. Elena was aware of people watching, of the curiosity in their gazes, but she could not bring herself to step away. "I heard you got the teaching position," Cole said. "Congratulations." "Thank you. I start Monday. I am nervous." "You will be wonderful. The children are lucky to have you." "You have a great deal of faith in someone you barely know," Cole smiled. "I am a good judge of character." "Comes from working with horses." Elena laughed, surprising herself. She had not laughed much since her father died, but Cole seemed to draw it out of her effortlessly. "Are you comparing me to a horse, Mr. Hartley?" "Only in the best ways, Miss Vasquez. Spirit, intelligence, grace." His eyes were warm. "Would you have dinner with me? There is a restaurant, not fancy, but the food is decent." Elena knew she should say no. They barely knew each other. People would talk. It was not proper, but she found herself nodding anyway. "I would like that." They ate at the Silver Creek restaurant, a simple establishment that served steak and potatoes and surprisingly good apple pie. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as it had in Cole's cabin. He told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about learning horses from his father before the war. Elena talked about her mother, who had died when she was young, about her father's dream of education for all. "He would be proud of you," Cole said quietly. "Taking on the school here, making his dream continue." "I hope so. I miss him terribly." "I understand. I lost my parents years ago. The missing does not go away, but it gets easier to carry." Elena looked at him across the table, at this man who seemed to understand grief and hope in equal measure, and felt something shift in her chest. Something that was more than attraction, deeper than simple fondness. They walked back to the boarding house slowly, taking the long way, neither wanting the evening to end. The sun was setting, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Stars were beginning to appear. "May I see you again?" Cole asked when they reached Mrs. Morrison's porch. "I would like that very much. Sunday, I could come to town after church, take you riding if you want, show you the country. Sunday would be perfect." Cole took her hand and raised it to his lips, a gesture that should have seemed old-fashioned but instead felt exactly right. "Until Sunday, then." Elena watched him ride away into the gathering dark, the travois with the sleeping pup trailing behind, and she felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt happy. Saturday she spent preparing for the school term. Sunday morning she attended church, where Reverend Walsh welcomed her warmly, and several families introduced themselves and their children. Sunday afternoon, Cole arrived exactly on time, riding a beautiful bay gelding and leading a gentle sorrel mare for Elena. They rode into the hills together, and Cole showed her the country he loved. Hidden canyons where petroglyphs decorated the walls, springs that bubbled up clear and cold from the rock, meadows where wild horses grazed. He told her the names of plants and birds, pointed out animal tracks in the dust. shared the quiet knowledge he had gathered from years of paying attention. Elena felt herself relaxing in ways she had not known. She was tense, the beauty of the land and Cole's easy companionship soothing something deep in her soul. They sat together on a rock outcropping and watched the sun move across the sky, and she told him things she had not told anyone. About her fear that she was not good enough to honor her father's legacy, about the loneliness that had followed her from Santa Fe, about her hope that Silver Creek might become home. "It will," Cole said. "Give it time. Let people get to know you." "Have you let people here get to know you?" He smiled ruefully. "Fair point. I keep to myself mostly. Easier that way. Easier but lonelier." "Yes," he looked at her. "Lonelier." The air between them hummed with possibility. Cole reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek. "Elena, I know we have only just met, but I find myself thinking about you constantly. I would like to court you properly if you are willing. I know I am just a horse trader and you are educated and refined, but yes." Elena covered his hand with hers. "Yes, I am willing. And you are not just anything, Cole Hartley. You are one of the finest men I have ever met." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, his lips warm against hers. It was Elena's first kiss, and it felt like coming home and setting off on adventure all at once. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "Well," Cole said, his voice slightly unsteady, "that was worth the risk." "What risk?" "That you would slap me for being too forward," Elena laughed. "I am not much for slapping, but I am very much for kissing you again." So he did. They courted all through the autumn of 1883. Cole came to town every Sunday after church and took Elena riding. He brought her small gifts, wildflowers, a pretty stone, a book of poetry he thought she would like. They attended the town dances together, where Cole proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, despite claiming he had 2 left feet. They had supper together at the restaurant, took walks in the evening when her teaching duties were done, talked about everything and nothing. Elena threw herself into teaching with passion and purpose. Her students ranged from 6 to 14, children of miners and ranchers and merchants, some white, some Mexican, some mixed. She taught reading and writing, arithmetic and history, geography and science. She organized spelling bees and recitation contests, brought in interesting objects to spark curiosity, stayed late to help struggling students catch up. The parents were impressed. The school board was delighted. The children, after testing her the first few weeks, came to respect and even love her. Elena had found her place. And through it all, Cole was there. Steady, supportive, making her laugh when the days were hard, celebrating her victories, listening to her frustrations. He was unlike any man she had ever known. Strong but gentle, confident but humble, content with his simple life, but always curious to learn more. The Coyote Pup healed as autumn turned to winter. Its legs set crookedly as Cole had predicted, giving it a permanent limp, but the little animal thrived on goat's milk and scraps and Cole's patient care. He named it Chance, because it had gotten a second chance at life, and he began teaching it to come when called, to stay, to trust. "I should release it," he told Elena one Sunday in November. "It is wild, not meant to be a pet, but it cannot survive in the wild with that leg." "I know." Cole ran his hand over Chance's head and the young coyote leaned into his touch. "I suppose I have a permanent house guest now." Elena smiled. "You could do worse for company." "I could, though I prefer human company when I can get it." He pulled her close. "Specifically, your company." They were sitting on Cole's porch, watching the sunset paint the cliffs red and gold. Chance was curled at their feet, dozing. The air had turned crisp with the approach of winter, and Elena wore a shawl over her dress. "I love it here," Elena said quietly. I never expected to, but I love this wild, hard country, the space of it, the beauty, the challenge. I felt the same when I first came, Cole said. Like I could finally breathe after being closed in my whole life. Do you ever regret leaving Texas? Sometimes I miss the green, the rain, but no, I do not regret it. Everything important to me is here now. He turned her to face him. You are here now. Elena's breath caught. They had not spoken of the future yet, both content to let the courtship unfold at its own pace, but she could feel the question in the air, the possibility. Cole, I love you. The words came out in a rush, as if he had been holding them back for too long. I know it has only been 2 months, and maybe I am a fool for saying it so soon, but I love you, Elena. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you see the world. I love how you stopped for a wounded animal when anyone else would have ridden past. I love how you make me want to be better, do better. I love you. Elena felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were happy tears. I love you too. I think I have loved you since the day you set that pup's broken leg with such gentle hands. I have been waiting for the right moment to tell you. Is this the right moment? It is perfect. He kissed her as the sun disappeared behind the hills and the first stars appeared overhead. Chance woke up and yawned, unconcerned with the humans and their strange behavior. Somewhere in the distance, a real coyote howled, calling to its pack, and Elena thought about wounded things finding healing, lost things finding home. They were married on a cold, clear day in January 1884 at the church in Silver Creek. Elena wore a dress of deep blue wool that Mrs. Morrison helped her sew, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Cole wore his best suit, bought special for the occasion, his dark hair neatly trimmed. Reverend Walsh performed the ceremony before a crowd of townspeople who had come to love Elena and respect Cole. Mrs. Morrison cried happy tears. The schoolchildren gave Elena a handmade quilt. The merchants closed their shops for an hour to attend. It was a true community celebration. They honeymooned at Cole's cabin, which would now be Elena's home as well. She had given notice at the boarding house with mixed feelings, grateful for Mrs. Morrison's kindness, but eager to start this new chapter. She would continue teaching, riding the 10 miles to town Monday through Friday, and staying with Mrs. Morrison during the week when the weather was bad, returning to the cabin and Cole on weekends. It was not a conventional arrangement, but nothing about their relationship had been conventional from the start. They made it work. That first night as husband and wife, Cole carried Elena over the threshold while Chance danced around their feet, excited by the unusual activity. He set her down gently in the cabin that was now their home, and they stood together looking at the space that would hold their life. I added shelves for your books, Cole said, pointing to a wall where new pine shelves gleamed, still smelling of sawdust. And I built a desk for you by the window for when you need to prepare lessons. It gets good light in the afternoon. Elena walked over to the desk, running her hand over the smooth wood. It was beautiful work, carefully joined, made with love. You built this. I wanted you to have a proper place to work. You are a teacher. Teachers need desks. She turned to him with tears in her eyes. It is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me. You are my wife now. I plan to spend the rest of my life giving you thoughtful gifts. And I plan to spend the rest of mine giving them back. They came together in the center of the cabin, in front of the fire that crackled in the stone hearth. They kissed with the passion of newlyweds and the tenderness of old friends, and they tumbled into the bed that Cole had made up with fresh linens and soft quilts. They learned each other's bodies with wonder and patience, taking their time, laughing sometimes at the awkwardness of new intimacy, gasping at the pleasure of it. Afterward, they lay tangled together, listening to the wind outside and the pop of the fire and Chance snoring softly in his corner. Elena felt completely, utterly content. "I never thought I would be this happy again," she whispered. "After my father died, I thought that part of my life was over, the part where joy existed." Cole pulled her closer. "Joy has a way of finding us when we least expect it. Sometimes in the form of a wounded coyote pup and the woman kind enough to save it. We saved it together. We did. And somehow it saved us right back." Elena smiled against his chest. "Chance, the matchmaker coyote, he should be very proud of himself." "I am proud of him, of us. Of you, most of all." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two people who had been alone finding that together was infinitely better. The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Elena taught during the week, spent her evenings grading papers and preparing lessons at her beautiful desk. Cole worked with his horses, breaking and training, selling to buyers who came from as far as Tucson and Flagstaff for his quality stock. They spent their weekends together, riding or reading or simply enjoying the quiet companionship of each other's presence. Chance grew into a young coyote, lean and clever, his limp barely slowing him down. He learned to stay close to the cabin, to avoid the horses, to announce visitors with a soft yip. He was not quite tame, retaining the wild wariness of his kind, but he was loyal to Cole and Elena in his own way. People in town grew used to seeing the limping coyote following at Cole's heels when he came to Silver Creek, and it became one of those quirks that defined him. Spring came to the high desert in an explosion of wildflowers and new grass. The creeks ran high with snowmelt from the mountains. Foals were born in Cole's corral, leggy and frisky, learning to run on unsteady legs. Life renewed itself in countless small ways, and Elena discovered she was pregnant. She told Cole on a Sunday evening in April. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, as had become their habit. Elena had been carrying the knowledge for a week, wanting to be absolutely certain before she shared it. "Cole, I have news." He looked at her, immediately attentive to the tone in her voice. "What kind of news?" "The best kind. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Cole said nothing. Then his face split into a grin so wide and joyful that Elena laughed out loud. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around, laughing with pure delight. "A baby. Elena, truly, truly. I believe it will come in late November or early December." He set her down carefully as if she had suddenly become fragile. "How do you feel? Are you well? Should you be working? Maybe you should stop teaching, rest more, Cole." She took his face in her hands. "I am pregnant, not ill. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am perfectly capable of continuing my work. But what if? No what ifs. We will be sensible, and I will take care of myself, and when the time comes we will welcome our child into the world with joy." Cole pulled her close, his hand splayed protectively over her still flat stomach. "I am going to be a father. You are going to be a wonderful father." "I am terrified." Elena laughed softly. "Me too, but we will figure it out together the way we figure everything out." They told their friends in Silver Creek over the following weeks. Mrs. Morrison cried and immediately began knitting baby blankets. Reverend Walsh offered congratulations and blessings. Elena's students were excited, the girls especially, asking endless questions about babies and motherhood. The school board began discussing whether they needed to find a temporary replacement for when Elena's time came. Elena continued teaching through the spring and into the summer, until the heat and her growing belly made the daily ride to town too uncomfortable. In August, she reluctantly took a leave of absence, promising to return after the baby was born, and she had recovered. A young man fresh from a teacher's college in California took over her classes temporarily. She spent those last months of pregnancy at the cabin with Cole and Chance, preparing for their child. Cole built a cradle from juniper wood, sanding it smooth as silk. Elena sewed tiny clothes and blankets. They talked about names and futures, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about their hopes and fears. "I want our child to know about your father," Cole said one evening. "About his dedication to education and justice. That legacy should continue." "And I want our child to know about your parents," Elena replied. "About hard work and integrity and love for the land. Those values matter too. We will teach them everything we know and hope they turn out better than both of us. They will be perfect. They will be ours." The baby came on a cold night in early December, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Cole rode frantically to town to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had delivered half the babies in Silver Creek. Elena labored through the night while Mrs. Chen coached and encouraged, and Cole held her hand, looking more frightened than Elena had ever seen him. Their son was born just as dawn broke over the hills, arriving into the world with a lusty cry that made Cole laugh with relief. He was small but healthy, with dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same gray-green as his father's. Elena held him to her chest and wept with exhaustion and joy and overwhelming love. "What will we call him?" Cole asked, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. Elena looked down at the child they had created, this perfect small being who represented hope and future and the love between two people who had found each other against all odds. "Daniel," she said. "After my father, Daniel Santiago Hartley." Cole's eyes shone. "Daniel, it is perfect." They brought Daniel home from town when he was 3 days old, Mrs. Morrison fussing over all of them, the school children waving goodbye as they left. Chance sniffed the baby cautiously when they arrived at the cabin, then seemed to appoint himself guardian, lying near the cradle and watching over the sleeping infant with serious attention. "Even the coyote knows he is special," Cole said, laughing. "Everyone knows he is special. He is ours." The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful and occasionally terrifying. Daniel was a good baby, healthy and growing, but babies required constant care and attention. Elena and Cole took turns walking the floor when he was fussy, changing endless diapers, marveling at every small development. First smile, first laugh, first time he grasped a finger and held on tight. Elena returned to teaching in March when Daniel was 3 months old. Mrs. Morrison agreed to watch the baby during the day, delighting in having an infant to care for again. It was hard leaving him, but Elena had missed her students, missed the satisfaction of teaching, and the arrangement worked well. Cole brought Daniel to town every afternoon so Elena could nurse him, and they all rode home together as a family. Time passed as it does, measured in seasons and milestones. Daniel learned to sit up, to crawl, to stand holding onto furniture. He said his first word, "Da," looking at Cole with a toothless grin. He took his first steps on a warm day in June, walking from Elena to Cole and back again, both parents cheering him on. Chance taught Daniel about the desert in his way. The coyote would sit near the toddler, patient and watchful, letting the boy pat his fur with clumsy hands. When Daniel was old enough to walk outside, Chance stayed close, herding him away from dangers like rattlesnakes and cacti. The bond between child and coyote was something almost magical. "Your mother would say Chance is Daniel's spirit guide," Cole said one evening, watching boy and coyote play in the yard. "She might be right," Elena replied. "After all, Chance brought us together. Maybe he has a greater purpose. Or maybe he is just a coyote who got lucky and found the right people to care for him." That too. The years unfolded like the pages of a beloved book. Daniel grew from baby to toddler to young boy, smart and curious and full of questions about everything. Elena continued teaching, beloved by generations of students who remembered her as the teacher who believed in them. Cole's reputation as a horseman grew, buyers coming from across the territory for his stock. They built additions to the cabin as their family and needs expanded. A larger bedroom for Daniel, a proper schoolroom where Elena could work, a bigger barn for Cole's horses. The little homestead grew into a proper ranch, modest but comfortable, a place of industry and love. In 1887, when Daniel was 3, they had a second child, a daughter they named Clara after Cole's mother. She had Elena's dark coloring and fierce spirit, even as an infant. Daniel was enchanted with his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, bringing her toys, singing to her in his small voice. In 1889 came another son, James, who was calm and steady from birth, content to watch the world with thoughtful eyes. The cabin rang with the sounds of children laughing, crying, playing, growing. It was chaos and it was beautiful. Chance lived to be 12 years old, ancient for a coyote, and passed peacefully in his sleep on a spring morning in 1895. Daniel, now 11, helped Cole bury him on the hill overlooking the cabin, and they marked the grave with a cairn of stones. He was a good friend, Daniel said, tears streaming down his face. The best, Cole agreed, his own voice thick. He lived a good life, better than he would have had in the wild. We gave him that. Mama gave him that, by stopping to help when he was hurt. Cole looked at his son. You are right. Your mother has always known the value of a kind act. They stood together at the grave, 3 generations represented. The man, the boy who would someday be a man, and the memory of the coyote who had changed everything. That evening, Elena held Cole while he grieved. I knew it was coming, he said. Coyotes do not live forever, but I will miss him. Of course you will. He was family. He brought me you. That is a debt I can never repay. Elena kissed her husband's temple. He would say the debt was paid every day you gave him love and care and a place to belong. That is all any of us really want, to belong. You belong here. With me, with our children on this land. You have always belonged here. And you belong with me. We belong to each other. They sat together in their home, listening to their children sleep in the next room, remembering the wounded pup and the woman who stopped to help, and the man who had the skill to heal. It had been 12 years since that morning in the desert, and everything had changed. Everything had become exactly what it was meant to be. The years continued their steady march. Daniel grew into a young man passionate about learning, dreaming of becoming a doctor. Clara was all fire and determination, talking about becoming a lawyer or maybe running for office someday. Never mind that women could not vote. James was the one most drawn to the horses, working alongside Cole from the time he could walk, learning the patient art of training and breeding. Elena kept teaching until 1900, when she finally retired at the age of 39, wanting more time with her family and to pursue her own studies. She had taught 316 children over 16 years, many of whom went on to successful lives, and often wrote to thank her for believing in them. Cole's horses were known throughout Arizona territory, sought after for their intelligence and endurance. He never became wealthy, but they were comfortable, able to provide for their children's education and save a little for the future. In 1901, an opportunity arose that neither Elena nor Cole had expected. The territorial government was establishing a new school in Flagstaff, specifically focused on teacher training, and they wanted Elena to join the faculty. It would mean moving away from the cabin they loved, from the land that had become home. What do you want to do? Cole asked when Elena showed him the letter. I do not know. It is an honor to be asked. I could help train the next generation of teachers, spread the ideas about education that my father taught me. But this is our home. Home is wherever we are together, Cole said. If you want to do this, we will make it work. They talked about it for weeks, weighing options. The children were older now, Daniel already at university in Tucson, Clara and James old enough to have their own opinions. In the end, they made a family decision. They would keep the ranch as home base, but Elena would take the position in Flagstaff for a few years, teaching future teachers. Cole could make the journey between Flagstaff and the ranch, managing both locations. It would be hard, but they had never been afraid of hard work. The Flagstaff years were productive and important. Elena influenced hundreds of young teachers, instilling in them the values of respect and engagement, and seeing the potential in every student. Cole established satellite operations, selling horses through dealers in northern Arizona. The children thrived in their various pursuits, but they always came back to the ranch, to the cabin by the creek, to the red rock cliffs and the endless sky. That was where they belonged. In 1912, Arizona became a state, no longer a territory. Cole and Elena, now 51 and 51, attended the celebration in Phoenix as invited guests, Elena being honored for her contributions to education. It was gratifying, but what mattered more was coming home afterward, to the place they had built together. Daniel became a doctor, as he had dreamed, and opened a practice in Flagstaff. Clara became a teacher like her mother, fighting for women's suffrage and educational reform. James took over the horse operation, expanding it, applying modern techniques he learned at the agricultural college while maintaining his father's principles of ethical treatment and quality. Cole and Elena grew older together, their dark hair turning silver, their faces weathering like the land around them. They had been married nearly 30 years, and the love between them had only deepened with time. They knew each other's thoughts, finished each other's sentences, moved together with the ease of two people who had become one unit. On a spring evening in 1914, they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset as they had done for 3 decades. The cabin had expanded over the years, but this porch remained, the place where Cole had first told Elena he loved her. "You ever regret it?" Elena asked. "The life we built here. You could have done more, gone farther if you had not married a schoolteacher and settled in the middle of nowhere." Cole looked at her with surprise. "Regret this? Regret you? Never, not for one single moment. This life with you is more than I ever dreamed of having. You are more than I ever dreamed of having. We were lucky, that I found chance, that he led me to you. I do not think it was luck. I think it was meant to be. Call it fate, call it divine providence, call it whatever you want. But I believe some things are meant to happen. You were meant to stop for that pup. I was meant to be the one who could help. We were meant to find each other." Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. "I believe that too. Everything led to this. All the pain and loss and uncertainty, it all led here, to home." "To home," Elena agreed. "To you, to us." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one, as the coyotes in the far hills began their evening chorus. Somewhere in that chorus, Elena liked to imagine, was an echo of chance, still calling, still connecting them to that first day when everything changed. In 1918, the Spanish flu swept through the world, touching even remote corners of Arizona. Elena and Cole both fell ill, along with thousands of others. They nursed each other through weeks of fever and weakness, refusing to be separated even when the doctor recommended it. Their children came home to help, and together the family fought the disease. Both survived, though it left them weaker than before. Cole developed a persistent cough that never quite went away. Elena's energy was not what it had been, but they had each other, and that was what mattered most. The 1920s brought change and progress. Cars became common. Electricity reached even remote areas, the old ways fading. But the ranch remained, a constant in a changing world. James married and had children, giving Elena and Cole grandchildren who ran through the same hills where their parents had played. In 1925, on a summer afternoon heavy with heat and the scent of sage, Cole and Elena made the decision to officially retire. They turned the ranch operations over to James, confident he would maintain the standards they had established. They kept the original cabin for themselves, the place where it all began, and settled into a quieter rhythm of life. They read books together, Cole's tastes running to history, Elena's to literature and philosophy. They took walks when their aging bodies allowed, always together. They welcomed visits from children and grandchildren, delighting in the next generation. They told stories of the old days, of how a wounded Coyote Pup had led a young woman to a lonely cowboy's door, and how neither had let her leave. Neither let her leave, Elena would correct, smiling. The cowboy did not let me leave either, as I recall. True. I was smitten from the first moment I saw you in my yard, dusty from the road, holding a wounded animal and asking a stranger for help. And I was smitten by the man who had books on his shelves and gentle hands, and understood about suffering and healing. They told their grandchildren about Chance, about his intelligence and loyalty, about how he had watched over their children and become part of the family. The grandchildren loved these stories, begging to hear them again and again. In 1933, Elena fell ill with pneumonia, the same disease that had taken her father half a century before. She was 72 years old and she had lived a full, rich life, but neither she nor Cole was ready for it to end. He sat by her bedside day and night, holding her hand, reading to her, telling her stories of their life together. Their children gathered, knowing the end was near. "I do not want to leave you," Elena whispered one evening when they were alone. "Then do not," Cole said, though they both knew it was not that simple. "Stay with me, fight. I am tired, my love. I have fought so many fights. Maybe this one I am meant to lose." Tears streamed down Cole's weathered face. "I am not ready. I will never be ready to lose you." "You will not lose me. I will be right here." She touched his chest over his heart. "Always right here. Every sunset we watched, every child we raised, every moment of joy and sorrow we shared. That does not end. Love does not end. I have loved you for 50 years and it still does not feel like enough time. Then we will have to find each other in the next life and love each other all over again." Cole kissed her hand. "I will find you. No matter where, no matter when, I will find you." Elena smiled, the same smile she had given him on that first day in his yard. "I know you will. You are very good at finding wounded things and making them whole." She died peacefully the next morning, with Cole holding her hand and their children surrounding them, as the sun rose over the red rock cliffs they both loved. Her last words were, "Chance brought me home," and Cole understood she meant more than just the cabin, more than just him. She meant the life they had built, the love they had shared, the wholeness she had found in this wild country. Cole buried her on the hill next to where Chance's cairn still stood, under a cottonwood tree where they had often sat together. He had a stone carved with her name, the dates of her life, and the words, "Beloved wife, mother, teacher." She stopped for a wounded soul and saved us all. He lived another 3 years without her, cared for by James and his family, visited often by Daniel and Clara and the grandchildren. He was quiet in those years, missing Elena with an ache that never diminished. But he found comfort in the land, in the continuing legacy of their work, in the knowledge that they had built something lasting. On a spring morning in 1936, Cole died in his sleep at the age of 75. His children found him peaceful in the bed he had shared with Elena, a slight smile on his face, as if he had seen something wonderful. They buried him next to Elena, under the cottonwood, with a stone that read, "Beloved husband, father, horseman." He healed the wounded and loved without reservation. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family. James's children, and then their children worked the land, raised horses, honored the legacy that Cole and Elena had established. The cabin remained preserved and protected, a reminder of where it all began. In the original cabin, now maintained as a sort of family museum, visitors could see the desk Cole built for Elena, still sturdy after more than 50 years. The cradle he made for Daniel, books they had read together, a framed photograph from their wedding day, young and hopeful and so in love. And on a shelf, carefully preserved, was Elena's blood-stained shawl, the one she had used to carry a wounded Coyote Pup on a September morning in 1883. The family kept it as a reminder that small acts of kindness can change everything. That stopping to help a suffering creature can lead to a lifetime of love. That sometimes the things we save end up saving us. The grandchildren would ask about the shawl, and they would be told the story. About Elena and Cole. About chance. About how a single moment of compassion spiraled out into decades of joy, into children and grandchildren, into a legacy that would outlast them all. Love stories do not always start with love at first sight, the grandchildren were told. Sometimes they start with a wounded animal and two strangers and a decision to be kind. But the best ones always end the same way, together. And in the hills around the ranch, coyotes still sang their evening chorus, their voices carrying across the desert like a benediction, like a reminder that wild things and tame things could coexist, that healing was possible, that love was the greatest force in the world. The land remembered. The stones remembered. The family remembered. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Elena and Cole were together again, watching over the legacy they had created, grateful for the wounded Coyote Pup who had brought them together, and the love that had never let either of them leave. Their great-grandchildren would eventually inherit the ranch, and they would hear the stories and understand that they were built on a foundation of compassion and courage and commitment. They would see the old cabin and the graves on the hill and the endless Arizona sky, and they would know they came from people who believed in doing the right thing, in helping those who needed help, in building something that would last. And on certain spring mornings, when the light hit the rocks just right and the air was full of possibility, someone would swear they saw a limping coyote on the hill near the graves, standing guard, still watching over the family that had saved him and been saved in return. But that was probably just imagination, just the desert playing tricks, probably. Though anyone who knew the story, who understood what chance had meant and what Elena and Cole had built, would smile and think that maybe, just maybe, some kinds of love really did transcend everything, even death itself. Maybe some bonds were so strong they echoed through generations, reminding those who came after that kindness mattered, that love endured, that stopping to help a wounded creature on a desert morning could change the entire course of history. The sun set over the ranch every evening, painting the sky in colors that would have made Elena smile and Cole reach for her hand. The coyotes sang their ancient songs. The horses ran free in the meadows. The children grew and learned and carried forward the values they had been taught. And the story of the wounded Coyote Pup, the compassionate woman, and the gentle cowboy lived on, told and retold, a reminder that the best love stories were not about grand gestures or dramatic moments, but about choosing kindness, choosing to stop when you could keep going, choosing to care when it would be easier not to. Elena Vasquez Hartley and Cole Hartley had lived good lives, long lives, lives full of purpose and meaning and love. They had raised good children who became good people who raised good children in turn. They had contributed to their community, improved the lives of countless students, bred horses that were known for their quality and temperament. But what they were remembered for most, what the family treasured above all else, was the love story. The way they had found each other against all odds. The way they had built a partnership based on respect and affection and shared values. The way they had loved each other without reservation from that first meeting until death parted them, and probably beyond. It was a love story that began with a gunshot in the desert dawn, with a wounded animal and a woman too kind to ride past, with a man skilled enough to heal and generous enough to help a stranger. It was a love story that unfolded in a wild place during a wild time, but that was ultimately about the gentlest things: compassion, care, commitment. It was a love story that lasted 50 years and then echoed through all the years after, influencing everyone who heard it, reminding them what mattered most. It was, the family agreed, the best kind of love story, the kind that was true. And if that limping Coyote really did appear sometimes on the hill at dawn or dusk, watching over the place where his people rested, well, that just proved what Elena and Cole had always believed. That love created bonds that nothing could break, that kindness was never wasted, that the smallest act of mercy could ripple out into the world in ways you could never predict. The wounded Coyote Pup had led Elena straight to Cole's door. Neither of them had let her leave, and from that simple beginning had grown something beautiful and lasting and true. That was the story. That was the legacy. That was love.